Breaking news here to Fantasy Football Today and CBS Sports HQ. Vikings running back Dalvin Cook suffered a torn labrum in his left shoulder during the loss for the Vikings in week number 12 on Sunday against the San Francisco 49ers. The injury reportedly is not season-ending. According to the NFL Network, Cook could return for week 15 when the Vikings take on the Chicago Bears. For more on this story, we'll get to it right now. I'm Jamie Eisberg. That's Heath Cummings. Joining us is Chris Towers. So let's talk about this. Heath, no Dalvin Cook. Fantasy managers losing the number 2 overall pick coming into the season for the third time plus. He was injured in week 3, did not play against Seattle, injured in week 5, did not play against the Detroit Lions, and now he's going to miss a few weeks, hopefully, as he's trying to get back for that December 15th game with the Vikings still very much in playoff contention. But for fantasy managers, where do you turn? Is Alexander Mattison just a simple answer?
Oh, if you have Alexander Mattison on your roster, then fantastic. If you don't, then go check your waiver wire, because in 20% of leagues, Alexander Madison's still available there. He's actually been better without Dalvin Cook than Dalvin Cook's been so far this year. The 2 games we've seen Alexander Mattison without Dalvin Cook, 20-plus carries, 7-plus targets in each of those games. One of them was against the Lions. He'll be a top 5 running back for as long as Dalvin Cook is out.
Yes, that week 3 game against Seattle, Madison at 26 carries, 112 yards, 6 catches, 59 yards on 8 targets, 22 PPR points. Week 5 against the Lions, 25 carries, 113 yards, 7 catches, 40 yards, and a touchdown on 7 targets. So, Chris, I know you're going through your rankings on Monday like we all do. Is Alexander Mattison going to be a top 10 guy, a top 5 guy, maybe number 1 as they take on the Detroit Lions, which for the most part has been bad against defending the run?
You know, number 1, probably not. Jonathan Taylor would probably be number 1. But when you look at the matchup against the Lions, the only concern really would be the workload. In the 4 games that Alexander Mattison has started, he's had at least 20 touches in 3 of them. The one exception was back in 2020 when they lost 40-23 against the Falcons, and he only had 11 touches. I don't think that's going to be an issue against the Lions. So, yeah, I think he's someone you can look at and say he's probably going to get 20-plus carries. He's probably going to get a decent workload in the passing game. You know, he's probably going to be the number 3 or number 4 option in the passing game. So, yeah, I think you look at it all, and it's at least a top 5, maybe not, maybe a top 2 running back. Obviously a must start. Anywhere that he's available, you're going to go out and, you know, this is the kind of guy you spend all of your remaining fab on if he's out there in that 22% of leagues, I think. So, yeah, if Alexander Madison's out there, you've got to add him, and must-start guy.
78% is his roster percentage right now. Heath, in terms of anybody in deeper leagues, I want to make sure I get the name right here, so I'm going to look at the third-string running back for Minnesota. But Mike Zimmer was singing his praises yesterday. It's Kene Nwangwu. Had 1 carry for 7 yards against the 49ers. I'm not going to try and pronounce that again. But in deeper leagues, any interest in him? Or as we've seen, it's been kind of concentrated to one guy just dominating touches.
Well, I think it will be concentrated to one guy just dominating touches, but we know how valuable this role is. And we've seen a couple weeks. We haven't seen much in offense, but Nwangwu does have 2 kickoff returns for touchdowns. He flies down the field when they get him into space. And so if something were to happen to Madison this week, yeah, I think Nwangwu is someone who's worth a deep roster stash at this point, and then if something happens to Madison, he should be rostered everywhere.
All right, so the Vikings' upcoming schedule, they get the Lions this week, then they get the Steelers in week 14, and then they get the Bears in that game where Cook is reportedly expected to return. Again, that's according to the NFL Network, but we just don't know. Remember, he's dealing with multiple shoulder injuries. He's been playing through a labrum problem already, and now the torn labrum in his left shoulder, so we'll see what kind of pain tolerance he has. And let's face it, if the Vikings are out of it by that point, they're 5-6. If they lose these next 2 games, they might decide to keep Cook on the bench, make sure he's 100% healthy for 2022. But clearly, if he does return, fantasy managers are going to want to definitely rely on him. But just keep that in mind, that the next 2 games against Detroit and against Pittsburgh, that's going to help Alexander Mattison. Chris, let's talk about the other guys. You mentioned in terms of the passing game, what Mattison means as a receiving threat. Does this change things at all for Kirk Cousins as a quarterback, for Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, maybe more on the plate for guys like Tyler Conklin and KJ Osborne? How do you approach the passing game for the Vikings with Dalvin Cook missing time?
I think my assumption is that things will mostly just remain status quo. The way they've used Alexander Mattison in the past has basically just been they replaced Dalvin Cook with him. You know, maybe they'll, have a larger role for the backup, but for the most part, I think this is going to be the same offense we've seen, and that's part of the reason why, one, Alexander Mattison is so valuable for fantasy, but also why he's so valuable for the Vikings. He allows them, they have faith in him. They trust that he can step in and be very effective in that 1A role. And so as long as he's healthy, I would expect this offense is going to look much the same. The question really is the way the defense is played. The defense, has been in the bottom 10 in scoring this season. If they continue to struggle, I wouldn't expect that against the Lions, but maybe the Steelers, they might be able to put up some points and keep up with them. That'll dictate what this passing game looks like, because we know the Vikings, when they have a lead, they're comfortable to just run the ball and sit on it. So I think when you look at what this passing game is going to look like moving forward, I don't think there's much difference with Alexander Mattison. I think it's going to look much the same as it has with Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, it's a nice luxury for the Vikings to have. It's certainly a nice luxury for fantasy managers to have if you can just plug in Alexander Mattison into your lineup and he continues to deliver. Again, the 2 games that he started in place of Dalvin Cook, week 3 against Seattle, week 5 against Detroit, both of those over 22 PPR points. That's Dalvin Cook-like numbers. Again, the breaking news here to Fantasy Football Today, CBS Sports HQ, Dalvin Cook expected to miss a couple of weeks. We don't know exactly how long, but suffering a torn labrum in his left shoulder. The hope, according to reports, is that he will return for the Week 15 game against the Chicago Bears. We're going to take a break right now. When we come back, more on the Vikings, more on Dalvin Cook next here on Fantasy Football Today. Breaking news of Fantasy Football Today in CBS Sports HQ. Dalvin Cook suffering a torn labrum in his left shoulder in the Vikings loss to the 49ers on Sunday in week number 12. According to reports, the injury is not season-ending. They're hoping to have him back for the Week 15 game as the Vikings take on the Bears. We'll see if the Vikings are still in playoff contention then and how much that will matter to Cook and his health status, but hopefully he can return. If not, fantasy managers will need to adjust. As you see here, Cook has been a star among stars, which is why he was drafted as a top 5 overall pick, top 2 in the majority of fantasy leagues. And in his place, Alexander Mattison will step in and hopefully continue to deliver. As we've seen from Madison Heath Cummings, 2 strong starts in place of Dalvin Cook earlier this season, week 3 against the Seahawks, week 5 against the Lions, who he happens to be facing again in week number 13. Over 22 PPR points in both of those games. When you're starting to do your rankings, where does Alexander Mattison come out for you?
Well, you start at the top. That way you don't have to move him very far. I'm going to rank Jonathan Taylor ahead of him. I'll likely rank Austin Eckler ahead of him. I don't know if there will be anybody else ahead of him. And it's not so much, I think it's not that he's better than Dalvin Cook. We had Dalvin Cook ranked in this range from time to time this season as well. It's that he just happens to fall into these fantastic matchups where he gets the Lions this week and then maybe the Steelers next week. They've been awful against the run lately. So I do think he's a top 3 or 4 back, and it shouldn't surprise anyone if he's the number 1 overall back this week.
He's number 2 for me behind Jonathan Taylor. Taylor gets the Houston Texans, so it's a pretty good matchup for him. Eckler and Mixon would be the other 2 that I think you have to have a conversation about, because Mixon's been fantastic, and he's facing arguably the worst run defense in football in the Los Angeles Chargers. Eckler's getting the Bengals in that same game. So both these guys have a fantastic opportunity. But Madison, as we've seen, he's had at least 6 catches in the 2 games that Cook has missed. He's found the end zone in one of them, but the touchdown potential is obviously there, and you're getting 20-plus carries. So there's a huge opportunity for Alexander Mattison to step in and fill in for fantasy managers. Now, the problem is that he's probably not available on waivers in a lot of leagues. 78% is his roster percentage. Now, here are some guys you could be looking at as replacement options for Dalvin Cook. The most likely one that you should be gravitating toward is Boston Scott, because you got the Titans guys that are on a bye. Chuba Hubbard, if Christian McCaffrey is out, oh, by the way, he's also injured, is on a bye as well. You have Jamal Williams, who could be stepping in for DeAndre Swift in that same game. I guess Williams and Scott would be the 2 highest priorities that you should be placing if those guys are available. Which of the 2 do you prefer?
Well, right now, today, I think you have to prefer Scott just because we know he's going to play a major role. Even if Miles Sanders is fine, Boston Scott's going to see 10 to 15 touches, I think, minimum in that game against the Jets, and he's going to do some stuff in the passing game, and the Jets are the worst team in the NFL against pass-catching running backs. Jamal Williams, though, right there with him, and if you told me that Swift was currently ruled out, then I might have them back-to-back somewhere between RB10 and RB15.
So if they're both starting, Scott and Williams, you taking Scott?
And Miles Sanders is out as well?
They're both starting with the other guys that are injured or not playing.
Okay, then I'll go with Boston Scott, yes.
Same here, okay. And the reason for that also is Scott gets the Jets, Williams gets the Vikings. Now, keep in mind, the Vikings' run defense was awful against the 49ers, but they're going to get some guys back. Dalvin Tomlinson should be back from the COVID list. They might get Michael Pierce back as well. We're not going to see Everson Griffin or Daniil Hunter, but getting those 2 guys in the middle of their defensive line will matter in terms of facing Jamal Williams. But obviously the Vikings would love to have Dalvin Cook back. We know that he is not going to be there for at least the next 2 games. Hopefully he's back for the December 20th game on Week 15 against the Chicago Bears. How much faith are you going to have in Dalvin Cook when he is back?
That's going to be very tough, especially if he comes back in that week 15 game. That's the first week of the fantasy playoffs, and it's the Chicago Bears, who have had some success against running backs this season, and it's a Monday night game. So it's really going to depend on how much information we get and whether he gets a full week of practice. And if he's a partial participant going into a Monday night game the first week of the fantasy playoffs, I don't even want to think about it.
All right, so hopefully Alexander Mattison delivers. Unfortunately, Dalvin Cook will not be there for fantasy managers, will not be there for the Minnesota Vikings. They have a very capable replacement option, but you're going to have to scramble a little bit if Alexander Mattison is not on your roster. Again, the breaking news, Dalvin Cook out for at least the next 2 games, according to reports, dealing with a torn labrum in his left shoulder. That'll do it for us here with the breaking news on Dalvin Cook and for Fantasy Football Today. Obviously, a lot more coverage coming up on CBS Sports HQ.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.